So again, welcome. My name is Tony Bianca. I am at First Unitarian Universalist Church of San Diego, and I am the Director of Spiritual Exploration and Worship Arts, which is just a fancy DRE title. And so welcome. I'm very excited to do this collaboration, Adult RE, with all of you. Just a few housekeeping and logistics before we start. We're not going to spend time creating a covenant together tonight. I trust that we're all going to speak and relate to each other the same way we would if we were gathered in our congregations. Um, we will ask that you take space and make space. So, if you're like me and like to talk a lot, maybe just be aware of how much you're sharing. And if you tend to hang back, we would like to invite you and encourage you to participate in the discussions. The chat is open, so feel free to use it, but I probably will not have a chance to monitor it all. Kathleen and Charlotte, who I'll introduce in just a second, we'll also be monitoring it, but also we ask that you please not use it for like sort of running side conversations that might distract people or keep us checking. We don't expect any big problems, but if there are any, either individuals coming into the group or problems in the way we're relating to each other, one of myself or one of the other, one of my teammates, Kathleen or Charla, might message you or interrupt the meeting so we can deal with that. So we'll pause it and deal with it when we can. So before we go on, I want to turn it over to Kathleen and Charla to introduce themselves so everybody knows who everybody is.
Good.
Kathleen.
Oh, hi, Charla. I'm Kathleen Moscato. My title is Director of Programs and Family Ministry, and I am from Palomar UU, which is in North San Diego County in Vista. And who are you, Charla?
I'm Charlotte Bergante, and my title, I'm going to give the full title, is Director of Lifespan Religious Exploration, and I'm with the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara. And I'm super excited to get to do this with all of you. It's been fun putting it together with Tony and Kathleen. So,
Awesome. And I'm sorry, I just got a Wi-Fi notification. I'm not sure why I got that. So, oh, oh, everybody just froze.
Wi-Fi.
Yep, I had a Wi-Fi issue. Can you all hear me now? No. Oh, oh. All right.
oh,
You all,
there he is.
so I'm on my phone Wi-Fi now for some
Oh,
reason.
no.
So we'll see how well that goes. I have no idea what's going on. I just got a Wi-Fi notification that something's up.
Got to be heat related. Hopefully,
Yeah,
is
it
the
probably is. So we'll see. If I freeze, maybe somebody text me so that I know
yeah.
I'm not on anymore.
Okay.
Um, that'll be especially true when I'm sharing the screen. So, not sure where I left off, but here I am back. So
We just left off with me introducing myself, and so I think
great.
you're good.
Perfect. So we've called this "The Congregation is the Curriculum," and that comes from a longer quote by Connie Goodbread that says, "Faith development is all we do. Unitarian Universalism is all that we teach. The congregation is the curriculum." And as you might imagine, the idea behind that is that no matter what we say or preach or teach or sing, how we relate to each other and the world around us is the real curriculum. It's what we're teaching every day and in every interaction. And that's especially true for those who visit or are new to join us. So, over the course of these three sessions, we're going to take a look at different aspects of the congregation. Tonight, we're going to look at our physical spaces. Next time, we'll explore religious education particularly. And then the third time, we'll look at how we interact with the world beyond our congregations and our social justice programs. Um, so, Specifically, tonight, we're going to have several rounds of either presentation or an experiential activity, followed by the opportunity to have a discussion, and we'll have breakout rooms for that. Depending on how the discussions go, we'll wrap up sometime between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. And there should hopefully be time for some additional questions at the end, but we're going to have a hard stop at 8 o'clock so that those of us who are on staff can end our work days at a reasonable hour. And so, with that, I will turn it to Charlotte and I will share my screen to start with a chalice lighting.
And I have a little tiny chalice here, but since Tony's sharing his screen, I'll light it afterwards. All right. Chalice lighting is from Exodus, chapter 1. I forget how they go in the Bible. Chapter 1,
Chapter 3,
chapter 3,
verses 1 to 5.
verses 1 through 5. I didn't see the dash there for a minute. Chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it didn't burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground.
So it's pretty rare that I choose anything really from the Judeo-Christian scriptures. However, I thought that that reading introducing us to this idea of holy ground was particularly appropriate for tonight when we're thinking about our spaces. And I'll use the word sacred spaces. We'll talk about the inheritance of the language that we have as part of that, as well as inheriting our spaces in some cases. We inherit this language to talk about them. And so if that language is complicated for you, we'll talk about that a little later into the night, and there will be a container to hold that. We're going to start tonight, though, by thinking about some of the spaces that might be considered sacred, and just doing an activity that might start us thinking about what kinds of spaces are you most drawn to. So if you use Soul Matters and have done any of the small group curriculums, you may be familiar with this particular kind of activity from last month. They called it a Visio Divina. So if you've done a Lectio Divina activity, that's where you would read a passage and think about how the words resonate with you and really sort of dig deep meditatively into the passage. We're going to do the same thing, but with pictures. So in just a second, I will share the screen with about 11 pictures of spaces that people might consider sacred. I'll lead you through some questions to help you think about the spaces, and then we'll have an opportunity to discuss what came up. It's important to know that there's no wrong way to do this activity. It's just about letting the picture speak to you and noticing whatever happens to come up for you. You might find it helpful to have something to write with. We're going to talk about this afterwards. So if you want to jot down some thoughts, that could be helpful. And it's okay if you don't do that as well. So once again, I'm going to share my screen so that you can see these pictures. So take a moment and just look at the collection of pictures. Spend just a short amount of time with each one and start to notice which one appeals to you. Is there anyone that starts to speak to you or really draws you into it? And then allow yourself just to be drawn into that particular picture. Remember, there's no wrong answer. So if you feel yourself pulled toward more than one, just choose one. Try to imagine yourself in that space. What does it feel like to be there? What does it smell like? Is it warm or cool, bright or dark? What sounds do you hear? Is there music playing or is it silent? As you look around and experience the place in your imagination, what two or three feelings most capture the experience of this space? Imagine that you showed up in this space for a communal service. What would you expect that service to be like? How would people be dressed? What kind of rituals might there be? Would there be singing or chanting? Would there be movement? If so, what kinds of movement? And what would the energy be like? And then finally, think about the people you might encounter in this space. What would they be wearing? Would you expect them to be chatty and engaging or quiet and give you space to meditate and be? What kind of welcome would you expect? And how might you generally describe the people you'd expect to meet? So I said we're going to break out into groups so that we can talk about that. And one of the three of us will be in each of the groups to facilitate. Just want to show you the questions though before we go there, and the facilitators will have those questions for you. So we're going to think about which spaces we chose and what, if anything, your choice you think your choice said about your preference for a sacred space. Thinking about what about the space most appealed to you. If you had a hard time choosing the space, or was it immediately apparent? Were you like actively repelled by any of the spaces? Like, I would not want to be in that space. Or did it bring up a strong negative response? And just generally, what else came up for you during the activity? So I'm going to get us into breakout rooms. And we'll do three of them. And then we want to make sure that there's one of us in each. So Kathleen's there. Charlotte, I'm going to move to two. And I'm in three. Where am I? Sorry, folks. I wanted to do this at the last minute, so in case somebody came in late, I just want to see where I am. Maybe I get to join wherever. All right, I'm going to open up the rooms.
How long will we be in there?
Let's start with 10 minutes, see how that does.
Okay.
So hi, room three. Just let me pause the record. All right, so welcome back, everyone. I hope that those were productive and fun conversations. And I hope that I caught everybody a few people came in, and I think I assigned almost everybody a room. But if you were hanging out here in limbo for a while, sorry about that. Um, so in this next section, I want to just do a little presentation, hopefully coming in about 10 minutes, around the idea of what makes a space sacred, and then how that connects to us as UUs, sort of the UU aspect of all of this. So once again, I'm going to share my screen. So what makes a space sacred is the sort of the big question. And as I thought about it, I think there are really three three like theological ways we might say a space is sacred. So the first one is a space might be sacred in a particular tradition because the gods or God dwells there. So in this picture, we have some examples of that kind of sacred. So up in the right here, we have Mount Olympus, which is a sacred place because the gods literally dwell there. At least the Olympian gods, not all of the gods and goddesses dwell there. Below that is the a rendition of the Holy of Holies from the temple in Jerusalem, which is no longer there. But that was considered the place where heaven and earth meet. So the Shekinah, the Spirit of God, dwelled in the Holy of Holies, and the high priest could only go in once a year. And then on the left is a tabernacle from a Catholic church, which again, in that theology, they believe that God is literally present in the Eucharist, and so the tabernacle houses the Eucharist, and that particular space in the church is sacred because in that theology, God dwells there. So that's the first way one might consider a space sacred, is that the God or gods dwell there. Another way you might consider a space sacred is that it's set aside or consecrated, anointed for a particular purpose. And in the Jewish tradition, the word for holy, kadosh, really means like set aside or designated for a particular purpose. So up in the upper left, you have an ark from the tabernacle, from a synagogue, which would be designated as the place where the Torah is kept, and so it's sacred because it's designated as a that particular space for that particular use. Below that is a holy water font. Holy water is another object, really, that is considered sacred because it's sort of blessed or set aside for a particular use. You know, it's separate from drinking water or water we would clean with. And then a Buddhist temple would also be considered sacred in this way, in that it's a space dedicated for a particular use, in this case, meditation or pilgrimage. Some Buddhist temples are built over relics or on holy sites, and so some of them may be considered sacred in the previous way, that they're actually sort of holy ground, literally. But others are sacred in the sense that they're set aside or dedicated for a purpose. Then there's a third way you might consider a space sacred is that it just sort of evokes an overwhelming sense of spirituality or calm, wonder, or awe. And so this bigger picture is Sedona in California. This smaller upper right one, also California, is the Sunset Cliffs Cave. And also California is Redwood National Park. And so these are spaces that people might consider sacred simply because of the experience they have when they're there, the feelings they evoke. I will also say it's important to note that different people might consider the same space sacred for different reasons. So, for example, Sedona may be sacred in the it's all inspiring and I just sort of like the feeling I have when I'm there way for one person. Other people may consider it literally an energy vortex and sort of literally sacred, in a very physically spiritual way. The same could be true of Redwood Forest. Some may say I just am inspired and feel a sense of wonder when I'm there. Others may say that the naiads and dryads live in those trees and lakes and rivers, and so they're sacred in the first way, that the gods actually dwell there. And so we may consider the same space sacred for different reasons. So what does all that have to do with UU theology? So we have what I consider a sometimes uncomfortable inheritance. So we've, in many cases, inherited our spaces, but we've definitely inherited the language about those spaces. And it's language, both the language and the spaces are things that we might not choose if we were doing it all from scratch today. So, just like we might design a different building if we suddenly had a gazillion dollars and could do anything we want with it, we may also use different language to talk about those spaces. And in some cases we can do that, and in some cases we just sort of run into roadblocks because the language is so ingrained in our culture. So your church might talk about a sanctuary. It might use, like we talk about the chancel in our church, which is the sort of the stage part. You might talk about a worship space. So, we use these words. We don't always agree or even know what they mean for us. So, like we say worship space, and for some people that begs the question of like, what are we worshiping or what even is worship? Or we might talk about our sanctuary and we're like, well, is it really? Like, what makes it holy? Is it really holy or is it just a space we gather in? Um, our buildings themselves also might be outdated and they might be a little hard to function in. So we have what is sort of the prime example at First UU that comes up all the time is we have a choir loft that none of the musicians like being in. It's up the front. You can't see what's going on down below you. All the instruments are downstairs, and so like the accompanist has to be downstairs, and we don't know where to put the director. It's also fairly hard to access. I mean, there is a lift, but it's hard. So, our spaces may also be a little outdated and uncomfortable. Um, our symbols and the decor may also express an outdated theology. So down the bottom here on the left, I have a symbol of Unitarian Universalism that I see a lot, this chalice in the center, and then all these other, symbols of the world religions around it. And I wonder if that's not a way of understanding Unitarian Universalism that is sort of on its way out. The idea that we are sort of a cafeteria religion that picks and chooses from different traditions. It can feel for many culturally appropriative. It also, I think, sort of maybe plays into the idea that we can sort of believe whatever we want or that we're just sort of a conglomeration of other religions in ways that aren't very helpful. On the right, you have maybe a newer symbol that's expressing our values as we've redefined them in the newer Article 2. And so as we understand ourselves differently, sometimes our symbols and the decor in our churches take a while to catch up. I saw pictures of other UU churches that have these world religion symbols sort of big on the wall behind their sanctuary, and so they're harder to just change. I mentioned it in my group, but in these pictures that we looked at, letter D is the only Unitarian space up there. It's First UU in Baltimore.
Mm.
Um, and it very interestingly has those world religion symbols there, and it also has a huge Last Supper um, right in the back. So, though we've moved away from centering, at least in most of the UU churches I've been in, we've moved away from centering Christianity. There's a huge, Christian picture up there. The next idea is that without, this is my sort of smarmy way of saying something, like without God, we only have ourselves to blame. And so in some spaces, the architecture and the setup is sort of decided by the theology, right? So if I walked into a Catholic church, the sanctuary is where it is for very particular theological reasons, and at a time there were even particular people who were allowed into the sanctuary and others who were not allowed in. The pews were set up because of the way the mass functioned. And so the architecture was really defined by the theology. We don't have a theology like that. And so if our spaces aren't serving our needs, we can't really blame anybody but ourselves. Like we do have the ability to change them, within the realities of our finances. In some traditions, you might encounter screens or barriers or some other kind of separation, like a men or women's section in a mosque, or rails or stairs that separate the sanctuary from the space where the congregation would be. And so we have a really wide variety of design choices that we can make in our buildings. And yet, interestingly, many of our buildings look the same. Like in many of our spaces, they're set up like a traditional church, with chairs instead of pews or, a little multi-purpose more looking, but it also fascinates me that when we have a multi-purpose room, many of them end up looking exactly like, chairs in a row facing in a single direction, which is maybe more about presentation than it is about theology. And so the next step we're going to take is thinking about what story our spaces tell. If we're in control of the story, then it's really important for us to think about what our spaces are saying and if we like that story or not. So I'm gonna take a look. I'm gonna show you some pictures again. These are the physical spaces in Santa Barbara, Palomar, and San Diego. Again, you may find it helpful to take notes. We're going to have some discussion afterwards, after we're done looking at the pictures. So you may want to refer back to those. And you might also make separate notes for your church and the other churches, because I think it can be helpful to see spaces that you don't live in and, have the emotional connection to. And so it would be, I think, interesting to see if there's a different reaction to the spaces that you are familiar with versus the spaces that you are not. So we're going to take a look first at our curb appeal. So I've labeled them all in the corners. P is Palomar, SB is Santa Barbara, and SD is San Diego. So I wonder, as you look at these, and again, take notes, we'll talk about this afterwards. What do you imagine your first impression would be? You've driven up, you've parked, you got out of your car, and here you go. What's your first impression? What do you expect the community to be like and the people and the service just based on what you see? And what, if anything, comes up for you as you see those pictures? We'll just spend a little minute. Hold on one second, folks. We did. All right, let's take a look inside the space or inside the campus. So these are the outdoor campus spaces in all of the particular places. So what does the campus, if anything, say about the community values? How might you imagine these spaces to be used? What type of people do you imagine inhabit these spaces? Do you notice any symbols? Or are there things that you would expect to see that aren't there? So this is then going into the worship spaces at each of the three campuses. I'll just notice at San Diego, we have a chapel. So this smaller one in the center is the chapel, and this larger one is our main meeting house. So how do those spaces make you feel? Are there clues in looking at them that might tell you what those people believe? What music or rituals might you expect? What's your sense of how you might be expected to have to dress in those spaces?
Geez.
And what norms around talking or noise or behavior would you expect if you walked into these spaces? What would be your expectation around those norms? And then finally, we're going to take a look at the other spaces. So we've got two bigger halls in Santa Barbara and then a smaller gathering space. In San Diego, we have a meeting room, and then this is our larger social hall that's empty. And if I understood Kathleen right, Palomar does not have these kind of spaces. It's just all the spaces are multi-purpose.
Yes, we
Okay.
do not have yeah, other than our main space. That's all we
Hmm.
have. I mean, we have classrooms. We have smaller
Yeah.
classrooms, but
Okay. So again, looking at those spaces, what kind of activities would you imagine go on in these spaces? What's your general impression of the community based on them? And is there anything you imagine might be challenging to do or have in these spaces, or maybe even something challenging about the spaces themselves? Okay, once again, we're going to go into breakout rooms. And just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to keep them the same because then I can just open them up. Let's go with try 10 minutes again. It seemed to work. Did that work okay for the other groups? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go with 10 minutes and we'll see you back in 10.
cut off. I apologize.
Yeah, we also had a question cut off. It was just good discussion right to the end. There is an artist who gets around in UU circles to sort of just briefly answer that question. And so you may notice a lot of that sort of like terracotta looking, sort of flowy uh, art style. Um, Definitely San Diego and I think San Diego. There are very similar like memorial walls. So I hope those were again good discussions. Um, I have one last round of a little way to think about our spaces. So I'm going to take us on a, a two-part meditation on accessibility and radical welcome. So again, I'm going to just mute us all so that we are doing that. There we go, mute all. And so I'm going to do two rounds of sort of questions for reflections. Again, you may want to jot stuff down or you can just experience this. The first round is going to ask us to think about our own. So now we're thinking about our own churches. So whatever congregation you are from, whether it's one of the three we've looked at or whether you're joining us from a different congregation. So think particularly of your congregation. The first round, I'm going to walk you through the space as if you were someone who uses a wheelchair. And in the second round, I'm going to walk you through as if you are a single parent with children ages 1, 5, and 9. And so just imagine yourself as entering your space in a wheelchair. And I'll ask you a few questions just to consider to yourself. Is there handicap parking and have you found an adequate supply? Were you able to park? So now you're entering the campus. Are all the entrances accessible, or is there a separate entrance that I have to go through? as I'm navigating the spaces, what would take longer or require me to do something different from everybody else? So maybe that's navigating buildings. Maybe there's a lift that I would have to use, or an elevator, or particular doors I couldn't go in. Now I'm coming up to enter the worship space. Again, can I enter the same way that everybody else does? And what, if anything, would I have to do differently to not just get into the space, but access the space? So I wonder where I would sit for the services. Is there a designated area, or are there several sort of small areas where I could put my wheelchair? If so, where are those? How many are there? And what does their number and location communicate to me about my welcome in the space? Are there any places that I absolutely can't get to, or that would be exceedingly challenging to get to? I would maybe consider these any spaces where I would need to ask for assistance to get there. Would I be able to help lead worship? And would I be able to do that without a whole lot of fuss and bother or additional assistance? Thinking now more broadly about all of the spaces on the campus, what are the floors like? Or if it's outside, what's the terrain like? Is it bumpy or smooth? Is there paving? If there is paving, is it well kept? Are there a lot of cracks? And then thinking about any of the buildings, um, what doors would I need to pass through? Would I need to open them, or would they already be open? And if I needed to open them, could I open them? You may just sort of take a breath or shift gears. So now we're going to consider this our spaces again, but this time I'm a single parent, and with me this morning are my three children who are 1 years old, 5, and 9. So immediately I wonder, does this space feel safe for children as I walk into it? Does it just feel physically safe for my kids? What explicit or implicit expectations does the space itself communicate about children's behavior? So is it a really live, echoey space? Is it cavernous, and does sound travel really easily? Or is it a quiet, sort of carpeted space? Are there a lot of things or spaces that look precious, like that I might be scared to let my children near? Like, do they look like they would be off limits or easily breakable? Is there a separate children's space? And if so, what kind of space is that? What does it communicate? Is it a space that says children are welcome here and they're welcome to be children, and there's sort of supplies or arts? Is it a creative space, or is it a cry room? Is it sort of a glass enclosed square, or a different kind of space? And what do those options communicate to me? Is there a playground visible? Are there other obvious clues that children are welcome? And if so, what are those? Where are they located? And finally, when it's time for me or the members of my family to need the bathroom or privacy, are there children's bathrooms? Are there family bathrooms? Are there changing stations? Is there a place to breastfeed? And so we'll pause there. I just as an activity you might want to do on your own or maybe with a group at your own congregation, you might do that same kind of activity, actually walking through your space, thinking about those two, or you might choose other things like if I was a person of color, how would I experience that space? If I was a trans person, how might I experience that space? If I was a person with a history of religious trauma, how might I experience that space? If I was an elderly person or a person with a other physical needs, like if I was a person with a larger body or um, other physical needs that were not necessarily a wheelchair. So, really basically any kind of physical or personal difference. What does the space say about it? All right. So I am looking at the time, and I think maybe for this particular round of discussion, it might be helpful if we hear all of each other. So I think we're just going to have this final round of discussion for maybe 10 minutes as a whole group, knowing that we won't get to everybody. And I will ask you to, use your best judgment about timing yourself as you speak so that we can get as many voices as we can in that last round of discussion. And again, just as we did that, what came up? What did you notice? Are there things that jumped out at you, either positively or as a growing edge for your congregation? Yeah, Louise, go ahead.
Well, my overall feeling is that for someone who's disabled or in a wheelchair, I think we're doing pretty well for them overall. You do have to use the elevator in the welcome center. I think the cobbles could be bumpy on a wheelchair. There's definitely a need to open the doors. But overall, it's pretty accessible. I don't think it's almost the opposite for families with the children, I believe, that age. It's wide open. It feels a little unsafe to me. There's no place to play, no designated places, except there's this small part off in the patio where we have the picnic table.
Hmm.
That seems a little bit, that's a child space, but not significant. I think the pool is dangerous. There's sharp rocks there. They're not smooth. If a child fell on those, they could really gash their head. I don't know if there's a cry room. Well, there is a cry room. There's a quiet room off the
inside.
off in the meeting house. I don't believe there's any family bathrooms. There are non-gender gender bathrooms, but there are a changing station in the women's bathroom. So I think overall it's pretty welcoming for a trans person. We've really worked hard for that. I'm not sure about a person of color. And I'd say a large person. There's probably seating in the welcome center for them, but I don't know about other spaces. So that's my overall
Thanks.
feeling.
Thanks.
I'll say something. I noticed this last Sunday that one of the people who was using a wheelchair, the ushers had forgotten to open the side door. So he's having a hard time. And just as I was thinking maybe I should get up and help him, he got in. So, but that's usually that door is open. But, sometimes I wondered too about the old toilets in there that are lower, as opposed to like if you have a house where now the law is if you change your toilet, it has to be the higher toilet.
Mm-hmm.
And I've thought about that a couple times. Not that it bothered me, but it might, if somebody was maybe elderly, it might be hard, just that little bit of distance. And I thought, well, and maybe that would be something that would be, but other than that, that was the two things I thought of.
Thanks. I will just feedback that the fact that there is a separate door that needs to be remembered to be open and that I could not go in one door and access all the spaces, I find problematic. Let me just pause and ask if there are non-San Diego people. We've had two San Diego people in a row, so I just want to spread it out if there are other non-San Diego people who want to talk about their spaces and what came up. And I can't see everybody, so feel free to just unmute if it works.
I could talk about Santa Barbara a little bit. We've just finished a capital campaign in assessing accessibility needs of our entire campus, all 4 buildings, as was a big theme for us. And so we have some improvements we could make, but there is a ramp into the sanctuary. There is a accessible entrance through one of our gates. We're going to cut a new gate to go from one street directly into where the ramp into the sanctuary is. And in terms of, so the cobblestones, the brickwork that's almost 100 years old, been patched and repatched. It could use some replacement. I'm not sure, but it's not terrible. And the bathrooms, we have bathrooms just for children. In the main parish hall, they're men's and women's, and they're all accessible on a single story.
Well, and we have you use the bathroom of the gender that you're comfortable with.
And Lorraine reminds me that you can use the bathroom that you feel most comfortable with. The inside the worship space, the chancel is not accessible. We've looked at that. There's too much equipment underneath it. We really pipes and everything. We can't do anything about it. But replacing the pews with chairs is going to let us be more flexible in seating, so we can accommodate many different configurations and people's needs. In terms of children's, I think it's a pretty welcoming space. We've set aside a place in the back, just as you walk into the sanctuary, where kids can play. During the worship service, Charla or Reverend Julia has a story time down at the chancel, and all the kids come up, and Kids at Heart, and she reads a story, and then we sing them out, and then she leads them into different spaces that allow for them to do whatever they need to do. So it's a pretty welcoming space in that regards. We do have some accessible issues, and we're working on them. And I think we're going to have a really big improvement in that regard within a year.
Great.
I want to add one quick thing, because at least in the group that I was in when we were looking at the spaces, people admired Santa Barbara, for those of you from Santa Barbara, Blake Lounge, the room with all the couches. And that room is completely inaccessible to someone with a wheelchair right now. And we are considering extensive changes to make that accessible. But right now, if you are in a wheelchair, you cannot get to that room.
That's true.
It will cost like millions of dollars. We've looked at so many options, and we haven't given up, but it's hard with these older buildings.
It's one meeting room out of all of them. So far we haven't been able to do everything we'd like. But
it's on the list.
It's on the list.
So, Kathleen, I saw you sort of raising your hand. Would you want to share?
That was before Craig
Ah,
spoke up. And, one of the things that, in addition to the building committee, I'm also representing belonging and inclusion. And we've been talking about how to have welcoming art and, different kinds of cultures, maybe on a rotating basis that would attract people.
mhm. Are there any friends from Palomar? Realize we have, I don't think we've heard from Palomar yet about the spaces.
Susan, do you want to talk? I don't, you talk.
I think the voice of Palomar today, other than Kathleen, and I do see Judy kind of
Judy,
hiding in the corner, but I think we would have a problem in that a person in a wheelchair would have no problem parking, coming in, the door would be open, but then people would have to scramble around and move chairs out of the way. It's kind of a
Mm,
close, small sanctuary, and so people would do it. They would be very welcoming and happy to do it, but it would be a little bit of a kerfluffle, so that might be intimidating. Bathrooms are good. Kathleen has a braid rug out with chairs nearby, little chairs nearby, and things for kids to do at every service. But they also have a lot of activities going on for the kids, and someone would come greet the kids. As soon as we saw a group of kids coming, someone would go and talk to them about what is prepared for them.
mm.
Anything else, Kathleen? Bathrooms are good, very welcoming in that way.
When you don't have a lot of space, it's easy to make the space you have. I mean, we have a big grounds. We have 5
Mm.
acres, but we just don't have very much building. So
Mm. Interesting. Others who haven't spoken yet? What came up for you as you mentally toured your campus?
I
I haven't
going to
been, I'm
say,
Judy. Oh, go ahead.
Catherine here. I was a wheelchair user on my campus for a little bit,
Mm,
and it was very difficult, partly because physically I was not able to muster the power that was required to move my manual wheelchair from one area of my
mm,
campus to another, partly because the entrances that were available to me were somewhat limited, and depending on where I was. And we have an exterior elevator, freight elevator option for people in chairs, but you cannot operate it yourself. You cannot load yourself into the
mm,
lift and lift yourself into the sanctuary from the exterior. That needs some help. I'm very heartened by all of the thinking that we've been doing about how to make all of those spaces more accessible for folks
mhm.
with significant mobility challenges.
Yeah, and I think that's, an important point. I'm gonna mess it up paraphrasing it, but somebody said like we're all just sort of temporarily able-bodied, right? Like they're like given enough years, there will come a time when all of us are going to have mobility issues of some kind, and um, it's important that we have the ability to access as much as humanly possible the same spaces in the same way, you know. Yeah, Joe.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking about wheelchairs in San Diego, and yeah, I think, we can accommodate them, but there's things that it would be difficult. For example, after the service, when the ministers and lay people might be out on the patio, it'd be hard for the wheelchair user to get there, and I think they might have to go uphill a little bit or something, or at least get in the car and have the car bring them around to another entrance.
Mm,
And then also, yeah, it is sort of like their second class citizens almost. And then for them to go to the restroom, I don't know how easy it would be for them to leave the building and then go up and get to the restroom. So
mm.
yeah. And so this is my thought. Thanks.
Yeah, for those less familiar, our meeting house does not have plumbing. And so in order to access any kind of running water, you need to leave the building and go into the welcome center. Um, the bathrooms are all you, depending on where you went, you wouldn't find any stairs in your way, but I mean, even for a fully able-bodied person, like I think the fact that the bathrooms are in a separate building is just sort of an accessibility thing. Yeah, Alice.
Yeah, so I'm from San Luis Obispo. I think we're in pretty good shape. Both entrances are handicap accessible. There's parking there. We have pews in our sanctuary, but we have a number of shortened pews. So there are a number of places where you can bring a wheelchair or two in, and they kind of just scoot right in the place where part of a pew would have been. Our bathrooms are all on the main levels, and that's both the men's room, the women's room, the kids' room, and the handicap one. The one thing I thought I was a little concerned about is we have gates.
Hmm.
And although the gates would be unlocked, and I think they're quite reachable if you're in a wheelchair, I would just think that would be awkward to kind of get the gate open, get through. I think congregants are pretty good about helping, but
Hmm.
that seems like the one spot that I thought was a little rough. For kids, we have an area in the front of the sanctuary where there are toys and carpet and where they can be until their story time and they're sung out. So I think that's pretty good. There's also a nursery if for really young kids if someone wanted to put their baby there, or they're welcome to sit up with the kids in the front.
Hmm.
So I think we're doing pretty good.
Thanks. So again, I'm looking at the time. So I think I'm going to call an end to our discussion. I want to leave just a few moments to see if Kathleen or Charla want to have any final words. And then after that, I'm going to turn it to Kathleen for our extinguishing of the chalice.
Oh, I think I'm complete. I definitely appreciate all the conversation around this.
Mhm.
So you, Charlotte?
Yeah, thank you, Tony, for there were some really interesting conversations. One that we explored a little in one of my groups, but one that we could all think about is our campuses all look so different. And if we knew nothing about Unitarian
Mhm.
Universalism walking in, sort of the different takeaways we would have before a service, even if we just went to see, what would they tell us about what Unitarian Universalism is?
Mhm. Yeah, in our group discussion, in several ways it came up that there are very few visual cues about what this community believes, as there would be maybe in other traditions that have a tradition of iconography. But however, Palomar got points for the love sign, the love wins sign, which is a very visual cue of theology right at the entrance.
Yeah. And I didn't get a very good picture of the very front of our where we have other things that state what we believe in, but I did not take that good of pictures for it. So a
We
round building, it's hard to capture a round building.
we actually have those too. We have three pretty big signs.
Yeah. So
So I'm going to share my screen once again, just so we can all read along together, and turn it to Kathleen to extinguish our chalice with a very St. Patrick's themed chalice extinguishing.
all righty. In honor of St. Patrick's Day, we extinguish our chalice with these words adapted from an Irish blessing. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and the rain fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may you be held in love.
May it be so, and thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you at the next one, which is, oh, I just opened it and then it expanded my screen, which is on April 28th. when we talk about within our walls. And Kathleen leads us in an exploration of whole church religious education.
All right. Looking forward to
So,
seeing y'all.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you all, and have a
Thank
great night.
you.
That was great.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.